Hey YouTube, this is Elk, and today we're doing Ask Reddit Narrated, Episode 4. Sailors who have spent a vast amount of time in the ocean. Have you ever witnessed something supernatural or unusual? Spent a lot of time sailing commercially in the Irish Sea. On night watch, you are always acutely aware of everything around you due to silence and darkness. Some of the sounds you hear are deeply unsettling. I remember on a perfectly still night, just hearing a gentle knocking noise coming from what seemed like the outside of the hull at the waterline. No idea what it was, but it freaked me out all shift. Alaska salmon fisherman here. Last summer, my crew member and I were both falling asleep on a perfectly calm night when the whole boat started violently shaking. I wasn't sure if a tree had surfaced and punched through the hull, if we were somehow hitting bottom, etc., until we both stormed out the back deck in our underwear to jump in the skiff. Then, in the 10:30 p.m. sunset, we witnessed the cliffs around us shed layers of house-sized boulders with dust plumes hundreds of feet into the air. It was deafening. Turns out it was a 7.8 magnitude earthquake. Luckily, the tsunami was very small, but I've never been in a tsunami. My crewmate was posted up on the stern and me at the helm, scoring the horizon so we could motor into the wave of a lifetime. Distress flares in the middle of the Indian Ocean, sailing Nigeria to Japan at night when I was the third mate. Looked less than 4 miles away. Altered course to it, called the old man, found nothing and no one over the course of 2 hours. I was the only one to see it, and I know what I saw. My watchman was down closing cabin shades. I understand why we had to move on. Keeps me up some nights though. Did we come so close to saving someone's life and just leave them there? Alone in the ocean, no food or water? Did someone think they were rescued, but we ended up too far from them? Should we have waited until daytime? Did I just hallucinate? A maelstrom in Norway. It's actually really fascinating, but looking down into the currents is a bit freaky. It's like a load of whirlpools all happening together. I used to live near the Corryvrecken in Scotland. Scary shit. They once threw in a mannequin with a life jacket and a depth gauge, and it was instantly sucked straight down 262 meters, then dragged along the seabed for a few miles. So yeah, don't fall in, even with a life jacket. The closest thing to supernatural, or at least something I can't explain, happened halfway through Cornwall and the Scillies. We were sailing in a fresh breeze, 5 to 6 foot swells maybe. That's perfectly fine sailing weather, but the boat will rock and there will be quite a bit of noise from the wind, the sails, and waves. So we sail happy along when suddenly the sea is perfectly flat and everything is quiet, like somebody turned the sound off. I look around and the water is pitch dark. It only lasted for a minute and then everything was back to normal, but I got a really eerie feeling. My friend's dad is an old 30 or 40 year US Navy vet, no nonsense kind of guy. Many years ago, he was on a ship and he got a call that a sailor was freaking out and trying to jump from the ship. He was crying and saying he needed to get to his mother. Not long after getting the guy calmed into the medical area, they received a message that the sailor's mother had died that night. Flew helicopters in the Navy for a few years. On my first deployment to Southeast Asia, I was flying over the Sea of Japan and saw a large pulsing aura of red light far enough below the surface I could not make out a source. We were 30-ish miles from the shore and had not been briefed on any assets in the area that might make something like that make sense. No erroneous indications on instruments or radio chatter. Just slow, steady, pulsing red light. We saw it, circled it a few times, made a note of the time and location we encountered it, and my crew chief asked if I wouldn't mind getting the hell out of there. So we finished our transit, and I made a note of everything in my debrief. I passed it up the chain of command, but they basically wrote it off as some sort of visual phenomenon we had from a long day of flying in dry suits. It's always been hard to imagine our entire crew hallucinating the same thing. When I was a roving patrol on a submarine, I always thought I saw someone walking parallel to me down the missile compartment upper level. If I was on the port side, then I saw them on the starboard side and vice versa. I always chalked it up to pipes and valves creating weird shadows. Additionally, it felt heavy on that level, like there was some sort of presence. The feeling you get when someone's watching you. I never told anyone. Then one day, a few weeks into patrol, one of the other rovers asked me if I ever felt weird up there. He specifically said that he saw someone up there too, just like I had. We shared stories, and then talked to the third rover, and he said, "I only go up there to do my rounds every hour, then get the fuck out of that haunted level." Oh sure, lots of auditory hallucinations. You're all alone in the middle of the ocean, and you hear your name being called all the time. Or you're down below and hear someone running on the deck. I was a sailor in the Navy. Well, I was on lookout duty on the bridge at night. A dude walked and stood behind me, breathing hard. I was looking out to sea, and I was blocking the stairs going down, so I turned around to whisper, "Sorry," and what do you know? There's no one. I was tired, so I chalked this up to a hallucination, but it felt real. One of the most magical nights I have ever witnessed was when I was serving in a New Zealand Navy warship, and we were homeward bound after a long and unpredictable deployment. I was dealing with a bout of insomnia and decided to go down aft for a breath of fresh air. It was a very dark, moonless night, and as my eyes adjusted to the darkness, I really began to appreciate the phosphorescence glowing in our wake, bright green against the dark water. Then I looked closer to see a pod of dolphins playing in the phosphorescence, leaving their own bright glowing trails as they streaked through the water. Now, I knew what it was and what caused it, but it was something that I imagined would have appeared quite mystical to sailors back in the past. It was stunning though. I sat and watched them for about an hour. Such a vivid memory. I was in the US Navy and worked in communications. I was a supervisor on my watch and enjoyed working the night hours while on deployment. We stood 12-hour watches from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. Around 2 a.m., I hear some chatter over the 3MC, which is like our internal speaker system used between a few different stations on the ship. It's the bridge asking combat if they see anything on the surface, or air radar, maybe 10 miles to our west. Combat returns with a negative, and I don't think anything of it. About 15 minutes goes by, and the bridge asks again, and asks if they're sure there's nothing there. They ask us if we have any message traffic about ships in the area, aircraft, or anomalous weather patterns. I ask one of the guys on watch to perform the request, and now my interest is piqued. I walk out of the comm center and head up to the bridge. I was on a frigate, so the walk was quick, and I get up there and ask what's going on. One of my buddies points me over to the port side, and we walk over. There's about 5 or 6 circular shaped lights, about 10 to 15 miles out in the clouds. Pretty large. They aren't moving or flying around, but just looking stable. These lights are also casting lights downward on the ocean, and you can see the light refracting back at the water, almost as if it were a spotlight or a beam. From what we could see, it didn't appear to be lights shining up from the water, because they wouldn't pass through the clouds. The clouds also weren't super thick. It was lightly overcast, and it was the middle of the night, with no other light pollution on the water. There was nothing in message traffic about any ships, subs, or aircraft in the area. We were hundreds of miles from land, and the last report of any unusual weather patterns was a waterspout a few hundred miles away. We tried to take pictures with our onboard digital camera, using a long exposure, but we couldn't capture the phenomenon. After about 90 minutes, the lights slowly faded, one by one, and within 15 minutes, they had completely disappeared. I'm not sure if there's some sort of weather or atmospheric condition for what we saw, but for all intents and purposes, it fit the description of a UFO, an unidentified flying object. I work security on different ships. One time during night shift on a cruise ship, my colleague and I were in the security office watching the CCTV cameras and just talking shit to pass the time. At the exact same time, we both saw a black figure or shadow pass in front of the camera in the children's play area. We both got super freaked out, but kept watching the other cameras in the vicinity to see if whatever it was passed by those, as it was the only way it could go from where we saw it, and there was no way it could leave the area without passing by in front of one of the cameras. It never did. So we went to the area to check it out, but obviously found nothing. Afterwards, we went back to review the footage and didn't see any shadow moving in that camera again, even though we both saw it the first time in the live feed. Needless to say, we kinda started avoiding the kids area at night after that. A lot of death happens out at sea. That'll conclude today's Ask Reddit episode. Thank you so much for coming on this journey with me. If you liked the video, please consider liking and subscribing. Until next time.